What if your great-great-grandfather volunteered for the Confederacy at the start of the Civil War, fought in some of the bloodiest early battles, survived Vicksburg, then deserted, joining armed renegades in the Piney Woods, and fought against the side he once served? That's exactly what happened to my ancestor, Moses Oliver Walters, and it completely rewrote my family's history. History of Resilience is about my family's hidden American story, one that my own mother, born in 1930 to poor sharecroppers in Louisiana, had absolutely no idea existed. When I started digging into my grandfather's line, I did not expect to find a Civil War deserter who joined the Renegade bands in the Piney Woods of Mississippi, and whose extended family was right in the middle of one of the most famous acts of internal rebellion against the Confederacy, called the Free State of Jones. Moses came from a close-knit network of yeoman farmers, the Walters and Collins families, non-slaveholding, independent people who had migrated from Virginia through South Carolina and Georgia into Mississippi. They carried strong beliefs about family loyalty, self-sufficiency, and a skepticism toward wealthy planters and distant governments. When I found Moses listed with the Myrick Band in Jones County and then connected the dots to Jasper Collins, my ancestor too, the man famous for calling the war a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, it opened up a history of resilience I never knew existed on this side of the family. So let's start with that shocking chapter, the desertion after Vicksburg, and life among the Piney Woods Renegades. Then we'll step back and trace how a grieving Mississippi farmer who volunteered in 1861 ended up there. Because to understand the decision to desert, you have to understand the man, the brutal war he lived through, and the world he came from. July 4th, 1863. After 47 horrific days, the Confederate Army, trapped inside Vicksburg, finally surrenders to Ulysses S. Grant. The siege had been devastating. Constant shelling, civilians hiding in caves, soldiers reduced to eating mules, rats, and anything they could find. Moses was there with the 6th Mississippi Infantry. He had transferred back to his original regiment by the time of the Vicksburg campaign. He survived the starvation, the disease, and the bombardment. On July 6th, Grant does something surprising. Instead of taking 30,000 prisoners, he paroles the entire Confederate force. The men are supposed to report to exchange camps so they can eventually be swapped for Union prisoners. If they don't show up, they're considered deserters, AWOL. Moses never reported. Instead, he went home, exhausted, disillusioned, and done. And then he made his way to Jones County, deep in the Piney Woods of Mississippi, and joined what was known as the Myrick Band, one of the organized groups of deserters and resistors operating in that area. These weren't just random deserters. They were organized. They were protecting their families from Confederate tax collectors and raiding parties. To understand what Jasper Collins meant when he said it was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, you have to understand Jones County and the Piney Woods at that time. This wasn't the wealthy cotton plantation deep south most people picture. Jones County was yeoman farmer country, mostly small, independent families like the Walters and the Collins. In 1860, there were only about 400 enslaved people in the entire county. These non-slaveholding families had migrated together from Virginia through South Carolina and Georgia. Carving out small farms, they worked with their own hands. They were tough, self-reliant people with strong beliefs in family loyalty and independence. Many had opposed secession from the beginning, and as the war dragged on, especially after the Confederate Congress passed the 20 Negro Law that let wealthy slave owners avoid service, that resentment grew. So when Moses came home from Vicksburg, exhausted, half-starved, and disillusioned, he found a growing resistance movement already active in the swamps and thickets of the Piney Woods. Men were hiding out, protecting their wives and children from Confederate raiding parties that were seizing food, livestock, and sometimes conscripting men and boys at gunpoint. Irish Band and the more famous Newton Night Company nearby weren't just running away. They were organized. They were armed. They were actively resisting what they saw as an unjust war being fought on the backs of poor farmers. Moses joined them. He was with his kin, Walter's and Collins' relatives, who were already in the resistance. For months, he lived that hidden life in the Piney Woods, moving between safe houses, swamps, and secret camps, always watching for Confederate patrols. This was the world of the so-called Free State of Jones, not an official state, but a defiant pocket of resistance right in the heart of the Confederacy. When I connected all these dots, Moses the Volunteer in 1861, becoming Moses the Renegade in 1863, it hit me hard. This wasn't just a soldier who got tired of fighting. This was a man who had to choose between loyalty to a government that was destroying his class of people and a loyalty to his family and neighbors. And yet, that's not the end of the story, because he didn't stay a deserter forever. But to truly understand how he reached that crossroads in the summer of 1863, we need to go back to the beginning. Moses was born around 1830 in Georgia. By the late 1850s, he was living in Rankin County, Mississippi, married to Cynthia Franklin. They had 4 young children. Tragedy struck sometime before 1860 when Cynthia died. Moses placed the children with Cynthia's mother in Rankin County. Moses signed up locally with the 6th Mississippi Infantry right after Fort Sumter. But just a few weeks later, he transferred to the 18th Mississippi Infantry, the Confederate Rifles. Like many early volunteers, he was probably looking to serve with kin or neighbors he trusted. That decision sent him straight into the fire. By mid-June 1861, the 18th was on trains heading east. They rolled into Manasses Junction, Virginia, and within weeks found themselves on the battlefield at Bull Run, the first major clash of the Civil War. These Mississippi farmers expected a quick, glorious fight. Instead, they got chaos. The Confederacy technically won the battle. The Union Army broke and fled back towards Washington in panic. But for men like Moses, the illusion of a short war died that day. The rest of the fall of 1861 settled into a tense waiting game. Then came July 21st, the Battle of Bluff. Moses' regiment was part of a brigade guarding a crossing of the Potomac River near Leesburg, Virginia. What began as a small Union probe exploded into a vicious, close-quarters fight on steep, wooded bluffs. The 18th Mississippi charged straight up those bluffs into heavy fire. It was a brutal, confused battle on terrible ground. Their commander, Colonel Aramis Burt, was mortally wounded while leading the charge. By the end of the day, the regiment had lost 32 men killed and 63 wounded. One of the company officials later called Ball's Bluff the 18th Mississippi's true baptism by fire. For Moses, it was the second time he stared death in the face, and it left a deep mark. So that's how it began. A grieving widower and yeoman farmer from Rankin County volunteers in the spring of 1861, full of hope that this would be a short war. He marches off with his neighbors, fights at First Bull Run, survives a wound and a brutal baptism by fire at Ball's Bluff, and keeps going. Like so many others, Moses believed he was doing the right thing for his home and his people. But we already know where this road eventually leads, to the starvation trenches of Vicksburg, a parole he chose not to honor, and a life as a renegade in the Piney Woods alongside his Walters and Collins kin. Moses wasn't born a rebel. He volunteered before he was required to. What broke inside him between 1861 and 1863? What kind of war, what kind of experiences could turn a loyal Southern soldier into someone who joined the resistance fight in the heart of the Confederacy? Next episode, we'll follow Moses through the brutal fighting of 1862, including the severe head wound that temporarily sent him home to Mississippi, where he'll marry his second wife, Sevilla, my great-great-grandmother. We'll look at why Moses rejoined his first regiment, the 6th Mississippi, setting the stage for Vicksburg and the decision that would change his life forever. If you're enjoying the Civil War story of Moses Oliver Walters, please subscribe and join me for the rest of the series. I'm Debbie Pedersen. Hope you enjoyed this episode of History of Resilience. Stick around. The post-show notes are coming right up. Here's some additional context on Moses' regiment movements. After surviving First Bull Run, or First Manasses, Moses and the 18th Mississippi faced one of the bloodiest early battles of the war at Ball's Bluff in October. They charged up steep bluffs into heavy fire. Their colonel was mortally wounded, and the regiment took heavy casualties. Moses made it through, but these early battles were really rough. The 18th Mississippi remained in the Leesburg area through late 1861 and into early 1862. Then in April, at Lee's Mill, Virginia, Moses' one-year enlistment ended. He was discharged and immediately re-enlisted for 2 more years under the new Conscription Act. In the summer of 1862, while still serving with the 18th Mississippi during the Peninsula Campaign, Moses suffered a severe head wound in the Battle of Malvern Hill, the final battle of the 7 Days Battle. This was on July 1st. By September 5th, so 2 months later, that head wound would lead to him being medically discharged from the Army. After roughly 18 months of hard service and being wounded twice, this 32-year-old farmer and father of 4 headed home to Mississippi. He did not return to Rankin County. Instead, he went to Jones County in the Piney Woods, where he later married his cousin, Sevilla. Now, many of you may be wondering, why did he eventually end back up with the 6th Mississippi Infantry? After recovering in Mississippi, Moses was pulled back into service. The Confederacy was desperately short of manpower, and they put heavy pressure on discharged and paroled men. When he returned to duty, he joined his original regiment, the 6th Mississippi Infantry. This is significant because the 6th earned the nickname the Bloody Sixth for its ferocious fighting, especially at Shiloh. They had like a 76% mortality rate at Shiloh. In 1863, the regiment was part of the Western Theater forces defending Vicksburg. Okay, so this transfer that Moses makes into the 6th is ultimately why he found himself trapped inside Vicksburg during the 47-day siege. If he had not received his head wound at Malvern Hill, he would still have been with the 18th Mississippi, which would have put him at Gettysburg, right at the Battle of the famous Peach Orchard. Instead, it put him, during that same time period, being paroled, or the siege ending at Vicksburg. Two of the most famous things in the Civil War, the siege of Vicksburg, which was horrific, and Gettysburg, which was horrific, and right there at the famous Peach Orchard. Please drop a comment and tell me about your Civil War ancestor or a surprising story about one of your ancestors, especially one that completely changed how you saw your family. Okay, I'll see you in episode 2.